Join us on the first episode of our fourth season. That's fourth season of the WRAP podcast, where we discuss the WRU's new plans to shake up the game yet again, and we discuss Wales women in some very terrifying depth. Enjoy. Welcome to the Welsh Regional Rugby Appreciation Podcast as we enter our fourth season. That's right, fourth season, which makes us last 4 times longer than the average WRU agreement. I am Harley, and joining me as ever are Dan and Nick. How are we doing, gentlemen?
Yeah, all good. Not so bad.
Excellent. And with Lee's resignation from the main pod, so we can focus full time on answering people's comments on the YouTube, we have Hattie representing us in the Scarlets. Now, for those of you who don't know Hattie from her fantastic work at the Welsh Rugby the World Women's Rugby Treehouse. I'm doing well today. The Women's Rugby Treehouse. Hattie, please introduce yourself. And if you didn't know already, for shame, listen to the podcast.
Yes, so I'm Hattie. I do sound like this, but I am still a Scarlet supporter. I just accidentally was born in England. It happens. But yeah, as Harley said, I'm one of the hosts on Women's Rugby Treehouse. And you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Blue Sky, all that kind of fun stuff. And I also talk about rugby history a lot on the internet. So if you're interested in that, come find me there.
You're very welcome, Patty, even though you're a Scarlet.
Oh, well, you know, we've got fun backs tries. The best part.
Don't confuse Nick now with fun backs tries. You wouldn't understand the concept.
No.
What's that?
Right, so as there's quite a lot on the agenda, we will get onto the big WRU stuff later on. But first of all, we've got actual rugby happening. So we want to start off with Wales women. So I'm going to let Hattie lead onto this one because I'm sure she wants to vent quite a fair bit about some of this.
Yeah, so I met up with the lovely Hugh Griffin yesterday, and he asked me how I felt about the games, and I said, well, unfortunately, I've seen them both in person, and I think that kind of sums up the experience. It is kind of incredible how we have gone from bad to worse. But our first game was an unfortunate loss against Scotland, which ended up being, I believe, the biggest ever loss between the two countries, which was just heartbreaking. You know, as soon as we lost that match that we're out of the World Cup, there's no coming back from that. And then this weekend we lost again to Canada, which was expected. However, I don't think anybody expected us to just flop in the way that we did. I don't know if you guys watched either of the matches, and if you had any thoughts on them. I have to be honest, I'm just incredibly depressed about both of them. There was just no positives.
Well, Nick, I think you had a good watch.
I saw parts of the games, which was quite funny actually. I didn't watch the start of the game against Canada, and for some reason my TV came on on mute, and I thought, God, we're playing well, and then I realised we were the team playing in white, not red.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose it's disappointing. You know, they put a lot of emphasis after a very disappointing Six Nations on fitness. And I suppose my question would be, you know, should they have the same sort of scrutiny now as professionals that the men's team do? And I understand they haven't had as long, but I think it's starting to be a fair question now.
Yeah, I think just a little bit of background for listeners who maybe aren't fully aware of like the situation with the women's team. So Sean Lynn came in as the new head coach a week before the Women's Six Nations, after finishing up with Gloucester Hartpury, but there hasn't really been any major changes in the backroom staff. So Flower's come in, he worked in the previous World Cup, but I'm assuming there wasn't the budget, so he was let go. He's been brought back for this World Cup. And then Sean Lynn's sort of right-hand man at Gloucester has come in on a secondment, and I assume he'll be leaving to go back to Gloucester. But otherwise, it's the same attack coach who is not good, because I don't know if you've seen, but there is no Wales attack. It's pretty poor. And it's just trying to kind of undo a game plan that was set up for Eleanor Snowsill. She retired, and then Lakey George has come in and was expected to play that game plan, and they're two completely different fly halves. So when you add in the bullying and the really terrible contracts, and you come up to this World Cup, and there's quite a few members of the squad who don't have pro contracts as well, so we've still got a bit of a mix in the squad. It it is really difficult because I really do want to. Sometimes in women's rugby, we fall into this habit of being overly positive and being kind of like happy clappy and being like, oh, well, you tried your best. And you're right, we do have to hold them to a standard. They're not being competitive enough, they're not being good enough, but also realizing where that barrier is. I don't know if any of you've seen, but today, Georgia Evans, who is just probably Wales's best player over the last couple of games, has been receiving horrendous amounts of abuse for the fact that she likes to wear pink boots and wear a bow in her hair. And that's the slope that you have with women's rugby. It just descends into absolute chaos very, very quickly. And so it is hard. And I do agree with you. I do think they need to be held to the same standard as the men, or at least with the caveat that they don't have the same level of professionalization, they don't have the same academy structures, etc. But also realise where that boundary should be on where criticism is, because it just descends into madness, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that those are all fair points. I watch a Scotland game, and for me, rugby's a simple game. No matter who's playing, whether you're male, female, kids, or adults. If you can't win a collision, you can't get over the gain line, you're going to really struggle. And I thought Scotland got off the line, shut us down, and we struggled for ball carriers to get any sort of gain line. Which then, in effect, they counter-rucked us really well. Scotland turned the ball over really well, pinned us back, played on transition really well, and I thought our defence was poor as well. And I still, and I have this issue, or I've had this issue with the men's team. I can't understand why we have such a passive defence. If we're lacking big physical specimens as we are in the men's game, we're a country, I suppose, both men and women. We're not blessed with big people. There's not many of us in Wales, only 3.5 million people in Wales. Then for me, we've got to get off the line, shut that space down, get into that collision zone, and make the collisions more favourable and on our terms. Stop letting people run at us and run at weak shoulders. So I thought that's where the game failed against Scotland. In terms of beating Canada, I don't suppose anybody expected us to beat Canada, really. It was more of a performance-based thing. The Scotland game was the big one, wasn't it? It was a bit like the Wales under-20s World Cup, in that Argentina was first up. That was the cup final, if you like. So it was a bit deflating, and I think it's important on the whole for people to remember it when they're setting standards for the ladies team, that when rugby went professional in Wales in 1995, the men's team were pants. And for a very long time, they were pants until Graham Henry came in and professionalised everything. Now, I don't know, I'd be interested to get your take on this, Hattie, as well. I wonder whether in Wales, and I don't know enough of the Red Roses or the Black Ferns setup, for example, to get more of a detailed understanding of it. But I wonder whether we are just trying to go, well, this has worked in the men's game in terms of professionalism, so this is what we're going to do in the women's game. I wonder whether it's not bespoke enough for the type of players that we've got, the skill set that they've got, the size that they've got, the fact that they are female and non-male. There are biological differences, so we maybe can't do the same things in terms of our professionalism. We can't just regurgitate everything that the men have done, because it's different, and it should be different, and it should be bespoke to the women, and their needs should be catered for in terms of their professionalism, rather than it just being forced down their neck. Well, this is what we've done for 20 odd or 30 years in the men's game.
Yeah, so I think the Wales women's programme, when it went professional and kind of as it stands, I would say it's more based on the Red Roses programme than it is on a Wales men's programme. And except they haven't done it well. So they've essentially handed out, I believe, as last year there was 37 contracts, although we haven't had confirmation of who's currently contracted, who isn't. We know that Fionn Lewis, for example, has left the programme and she was on a contract. It's just all a bit muddy at the moment, but should be around 37. But but that's it. That's the only professionalisation we have, is that these 37 women receive essentially minimum wage to play rugby. But there is no professional structure for them beyond that. So if they want to play their club rugby and they want to play at a high level, they have to go to the PWR, and that's not connected to the WRU. Some of the younger ones and some of the ones on kind of the edges of PWR squads are playing in the Celtic Challenge, but that is not professional in the slightest. Quite frankly, Gwalior Lightning players have recently set up their own social media accounts because they've gone 2 years without anything. So that kind of tells you the level of professionalisation we've got in that aspect. In terms of what they're doing kind of behind the scenes, I know that Wales were the first programme to use the Vodafone technology, which is like menstrual tracking, but that's now gone to pretty much every team. So I think the WRU have essentially gone in and gone, well, we've given you contracts and we've given you this menstrual tracking app, and just left it at that. There's been nothing else. Whereas, oh, and red shorts instead of white shorts, very importantly. But aside from that, there's been no development. It's just kind of empty beyond the surface. Yeah, it's just a bit pants, really.
Yeah, I agree. And when you say those sorts of things to me, I think we're just setting it up to fail. It's just almost like a token gesture. So
That's exactly what it is.
yeah, so that's not good enough. That has to change, and whatever comes of this, slicing up of funds over the next 12 months in Welsh Rugby, if they're going to invest in women's rugby, and they're going to not take funds from the men's game, but if they're going to invest in women's rugby, invest in it properly. Don't play around with it. Don't pay it lip service. Go and do it properly, because I think that it's a rapidly growing market. Women's sport on the whole, especially women's rugby. I would say you look at some of the crowds. You look at what the likes of Iona Meyer's doing on social media, and then in terms of the stick that some of the girls are getting for TikToks and wearing pink in their hair and pink boots. It's just nonsense. I've said this on the pod before. The the women shouldn't be taking any advice from the men, because we've absolutely stuffed up
Yeah.
professional rugby since it's come in 1995. There's not one nation that makes a profit. So
Yeah.
whatever the women do, don't do what the men have done. It's absolute nonsense, because it hasn't been done properly. There's no way it's been done. Set your own chart, your own course, go and do your own thing, and show everyone how it's done.
And Harley's heard me rant about this many, many times. But women, when it comes to household budgets, women hold the majority of the power in like straight relationships. So to market sports towards men generally is a bit weird, because when you consider it, women make the majority of financial decisions in the household. So when it comes to women's sports, for example, merchandise and everything like that, the amount that women buy is significantly higher than male sports fans. And so one of the massive issues that you see in the WNBA, which is the biggest women's sports league in the world, I think, pretty sure, and then also at the Rugby World Cup, you're seeing things are just selling out, because the demand that they went for, oh, well, if we factor in this is how many fans we're expecting, and so we're going to scale from the Men's World Cup, this was the amount of merch bought by each person, so therefore we need about this much. They've completely sold out. This shirt, for example, that I'm wearing, that has been out of stock for like 3 weeks. It sold out within like a week, and I managed to get one when it randomly went on sale. So you've got all these things, they're just selling out because they haven't scaled things properly. They're not gauging the interest. And so if the WRU and any other nation actually invests in their women's rugby, you have merchandise available, you have all these other things, profits are going to shoot through the roof, because aside from manufacturing costs, merchandise is where you're going to make a lot of money.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because probably is a different. Like I've not been to any of the World Cup games, but I'm assuming it's quite a different vibe in the crowd, and probably a different fan base going. Like you go to International Day down at the stadium, and it's probably men in brown shoes and blue jeans, and going to have 15 pints and to watch watch Wales hopefully win, where it's probably slightly different, I'm assuming, going to watch the women plays, maybe more family orientated and stuff like that.
Um, there are families. I won't lie, it's predominantly lesbians. And it's a great time.
Yeah.
Um, so um, so yeah, it is just the demographic I think leans a little bit younger. Not just in terms of there's children there, but there's people in their, women in their 20s going. There are a lot of men there, various ages, but it's overwhelmingly more female. There are probably slightly more children, and just a lot of queer women enjoying the rugby. I would say it's a lot more friendlier. You're not going to have a beer spilled on you, and if you are, somebody's going to profusely apologise. But yeah, it's. I would say the gap isn't as big as between men's and women's football, which are completely different. But yeah, it is a different crowd.
Yeah, I do think though, unfortunately, the girls are probably going to have to start picking up some results just to keep the wolf from the door.
Yeah.
Whether it be in the media or on social media. But if anyone can turn it around, I think it's Sean Lynn. I like the things he says. I like, from the little bits we get to see on social media, I think he's a positive leader. He wants to drive a level of positivity and belief. However, I think he still holds people accountable. So, fingers crossed. The good thing about this World Cup, I suppose, it gives Wales an exact standard bearer as to where they are. That's so the only way it can be up in theory from this World Cup. What are the teams above us doing that we are not, and what are the teams below us doing to catch up very quickly, and how do we stay ahead of the game? So it'll be interesting to see what comes over the next 12 months.
Mm. Yeah, and I think looking ahead to this weekend, coming up against Fiji is going to be a big one. It's a game that a couple of years ago we would have assumed we would have won. Even 6 months ago, we would have assumed. However, we're coming up against our old coach. We're coming up against a team that is a vastly more organised Fiji than we're used to seeing. And I think if we lose, it's going to be bad. I think social media will be bad. I think the effect on the players will be bad. Um, but I think that's the standard that we're
Do
at.
they have to make any changes if we lose and we go 3-0
Yeah,
or 0-3?
I personally, I've said this before, I think, on Women's Rugby Treehouse, but personally, I feel that Sean coming in, unfortunately, was at the wrong time. Coming in straight before the Six Nations, straight before a World Cup, it had to be done because of the bullying. But I would have liked to have seen him get a clean slate after the World Cup because this was going to be a disaster. The program had been run into the ground. It was going to be bad. We didn't expect it to be this bad, but it's been bad. And I think, he's got a bit of an uphill battle now, but I think there needs to be a cull in the programme. A lot of the younger girls coming through now, the likes of Maisie Davis, Allow Pierce, Sarah Lockwood, etc., they're all incredible players and they've come through a much better development programme, but they're maybe not quite ready or there for international rugby yet. If they were English, they'd be playing in the PWR for a couple of years and getting club experience. But because that doesn't exist in Wales, they've just been thrust into international duty. So I would like to see maybe a bit of a cull going on after the World Cup, and a completely new look team and just rebuild for a new cycle rather than keep on players who maybe might not make the next World Cup. I think we just go for a fresh young squad, even if that means we have bad Six Nations results next year. I think that would be better and have our younger players gain experience than keep on a lot of players who aren't suitable anymore.
I think the 20s and the 18s have picked up some results lately as well, haven't they?
Yeah,
And there's some
yeah.
good players coming through there, the likes of Evie Hill on the tight dead and things like that, the girl
Oh,
from New
she's
Zealand. So,
incredible. Incredible player.
but again, like whatever, whether you play for the men or the women, playing tight dead at 18 years of age, you're going up against a gnarly old loose head somewhere. It's good they're going to make your life difficult. So,
Yeah.
it's all an experience thing. But then maybe you're right. Maybe people like Evie need to be fast tracked and given that level of professionalism into the 20s, and hopefully to gain some experience, better experience in the club game somewhere.
Yeah, because I think unfortunately, just very quickly, unfortunately, one of the issues that women's rugby faces is that players are rewarded rather than invested in. So an 18-year-old male in Wales is, if he's going to be a promising rugby player, he's going to be on sort of an apprentice contract, he's going to go through the academy. A female player is going to go to university, is not going to have any financial assistance, is still probably going to be working a part-time job to back herself up. She's going to be not playing really a lot of club rugby. It's just going to be bucks, maybe going across the border to Hartpury. And then when she hits like 19, 20, she might get a boost into the senior team. And in that case, she has to make her case to have a contract at all. So it's a very different kettle of fish, and it does put their development back significantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's quite a comprehensive thing of for the women's game. 2 points. So you mentioned obviously with players like Maisie Davis not necessarily been allowed. One thing I would say is that even if they maybe weren't ready for international, they are standouts in this Wales team.
Yeah.
Because one of the big criticisms I know me and Sean, your co-host, we've complained about the lack of physicality in that Wales women's squad, and aside from Georgia Evans, who always brings it, Allow and Maisie are two of the others absolute standouts of driving things forward.
Yeah.
So I mean, they may not be ready to be top flight internationals, but they certainly seem to be showing the benefits of having a system where they have been going through an under 18s and under 20s system. So hopefully that'll only get better.
Very quickly, I actually managed to meet Maisie after the Scotland game. And I have to say, like, her reaction to the game, like she was disappointed, obviously, but her reaction to the game and everything else, I was like, this could be a future Wales captain. Like, the head on that very, very young shoulders was incredible, and she shows a lot of leadership on the pitch. She did at Gwalior Lightning as well, and I think, yeah, she's going to be a big name to look out for.
Anything you want to add to this discussion, Nick?
No, that's fine. No, thank you.
Right. So the other little bit of regional-ish rugby that we've had going on is the under 18 championship for the men. I haven't even seen fixtures out for the women's under 18s yet. WRU, sad face. So I won't go through the result all 3 rounds that have gone so far, but last weekend Cardiff beat RGC 49-19 at home. Dragons beat the Ospreys 33-17. So East is beast. It's bad like West. The table at the moment after 3 rounds is Cardiff on top, played 3-1-3. Dragons have played 2-1-1, lost 1. Ospreys have played 3, lost 1-1, lost 2. Scarlets and RGC have both basically played 2, lost 1, and they have a draw between them. So that's the fixtures going for this weekend are RGC hosting the Dragons and Scarlets hosting Cardiff, with Ospreys getting the bye week. And then the following weekend, Dragons host Scarlets and Ospreys host RGC, and that's that first block until January. So I don't know if you've been keeping up with the under 18s results. I say I've only sort of been hearing about the Cardiff under 18s tangibly because Cardiff season ticket holders get the home games for free. It's part of that, and I've been hearing some good things about some of the players on that. Dan, don't know if you've been keeping up with the Dragons.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit. I don't know whether you saw the try that was doing the rounds on the internet from Rudy Creel down at the Arms Park against the Blues, whereby the Dragons, who said, picked up the ball, chipped and chased for himself, rounding the full back and dotting down near the post. That was a fantastic individual score. And probably if we had football's version of what's the goal of the year award that they have in soccer, you know what I mean, the Puskas award, then he would probably be up for it. He comes from good rugby stock, Rudy. Actually, he plays on the loose head. His brother Chester played for the Dragons Academy against Cross Keys on the weekend. They lost 21-7 to Cross Keys in a pre-season fixture there. And Chester also plays for Suffolk Abertlery, and his dad, Matthew Creel, is a former Wales 21s international, I believe. who now runs a mental health charity. So they're a good rugby family. So they want Rudy definitely is definitely one to keep an eye on the loose head. And I've been impressed actually with the Dragons age group stuff so far. The rag stuff's been pretty good for them. And long may it continue. Where are they playing RGC next, home or away?
They are playing RGC away, so that's going to be settings it will. So that's going to be a bit of a. I know that's
Yeah.
not always a nice trip, even in
No,
the
a lot.
SLC. I know a lot of
Yeah,
people don't like going that far up north.
no, and I would have thought they'd probably go up on the same day as well. So let's wait and see. But I would expect them to pick up a result of some description up there. So yeah, so far so good for the Dragons.
I think what's interesting in all the teams is you see surnames, you think, oh, I wonder if that's Paul James's other lad, like Dullan's played for,
Yeah,
and then Mason was playing, and I think Morgan Morse was playing, his brother's playing as well. I think he was tight head in one of the games. There's another Fender in the team, so it's like as you say, uh, you know, I wouldn't use the word incestuous, but obviously there's tradition and
absolutely.
in families, and that's good, and opportunities. And I think with all these, obviously, we joke about, and obviously Cardiff, fair play to Cardiff, they seem to be the team to beat again this year. But it is more about development opportunities, isn't it, for these youngsters?
Oh, of course it is. Yeah, game time, and I think the Dragons have been split in the age group a little bit as well. Playing some of the older ones that that are in that sort of double bracketed age group, sort of 16s, 18s, and 20s there. So I think they've been splitting it a little bit. But yes, exciting times. So for people, when people say that we just haven't got the talent, I'm calling bollocks on that because there's plenty of it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the same with the discussion of the women's game. I think the issue is not necessarily the talent of the players; it's the investment in the players to make them the best that they can be, and that does start with the coaching teams, which I'm sure we'll go on to because next is the news, and Nick has the headlines for us.
Yeah, sorry. Obviously, it's been a little bit of time since we recorded, so I think I've got everything sort of try to capture in that period. Obviously, we're recording on the 1st of September. It's a big day for Welsh Rugby. We're obviously going to talk
Yeah.
about the consultation, but it's also today is the official start full time for Dave Redding in his new role of Director Rugby and Elite Performance. I think his name might pop up again later in the podcast. But also similarly a start for first day in role for Steve Tandy as the new heads coach for the men's team. So obviously we all wish him all the very best. We know it's not an easy one, but good luck to him. I think since we last recorded, probably the biggest Welsh rugby news is obviously Louis Rees-Zammit is back. 24 is back in rugby after giving American football a go. And unfortunately, I suppose no surprise to us, he's not joined a Welsh team. He's gone over the bridge and he's signed for the Bristol Bears. He's got 32 caps and he's scored 14 international players. And I'm sure the Bears fans will be really looking forward to seeing him play this season. And just a question for me, do you think we might get to see him in the autumn internationals?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
In private channels, I've made my opinions on Zammit and how I'd much rather someone with a high work rate who's thing. But people do point out that there is no substitute for pace, and let's be honest, he hasn't had to make a tackle in nearly 2 years, so he's going to be fit and fresh.
I think, yeah, he's a bit of a one-trick pony, but it's a really good trick. So yeah, we'll see him.
And he's got a very pretty face, so he's going to be front and centre of a lot of social media the Welsh Rugby Union put out.
Will we see Taylor Swift in the crowd? Probably not.
Yeah. I bet they don't charge you for a ticket. I think it's a no-brainer bringing it back. He offers that. He's an out-and-out finisher. We've seen that. I don't think we have that in the squad at the moment. You kick loosely to him in open play. There's no one that can do what he does. So I'd be interested to see what he brings back from American football as well. Apparently he's put a bit of weight on. His agility and his handling maybe a little bit better as well. So yeah, let's watch this space for him. It's a good addition to have back. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, it's nice to have a little bit of a positive news, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, going to the regions then. Obviously, the Ospreys have announced that Evan Daniel has joined the team ahead of the 25-26 season. 22-year-old made 24 appearances for Cardiff. Quite a physical lad, 6'1", 109 kilograms. So he should be another good addition to the squad. The Ospreys have also signed former under-20 and scrum half Harry Williams. He has obviously had some time with the Scarlets, then was let go, I believe. Joined Amptill in the Championship in England, and most recently has been playing for, if I'm pronouncing this right, Tugarangon Vikings in the Premier Division in Canberra in Australia. So we'll see how he gets on. Over in the Scarlets, two emerging young front row talents, Josh Morse and Isaac Young, have signed contracts with the club. I assume that's from academy up to a full-time contract, professional contracts. At the other end of the scale, he's still only 27 in fairness, but he seems to have been there forever. Johan Nicholas, 27, has extended his stay. Also, another homegrown talent, commanding boy, I think, second row, Jack Price, is staying at the club. And probably some really good news as well. I'm sure you had big offers elsewhere. Blair Murray is staying with the Scarlets, and at the moment that agreement is until the end of 2028. And he had a fantastic season in Welsh Rugby last year and shone on the international stage as well. So good luck to him. North Island New Zealander, but obviously qualifies for Wales because his wife is from Tonneref Isle. The Dragons have confirmed the signing of Irish scrum half Niall Armstrong, who was lastly with Exeter Chiefs. The 25-year-old came through the Ulster Academy and has made 18 appearances across 2 seasons at Sandy Park. They've also announced that they have the same co-captains this season as last in Ben Carter and Angus O'Brien. Just hope they have a little bit of more luck with injuries, because both had quite considerable spells last season when unfortunately they weren't able to take the field. And off the field, I thought this was fantastic news, that the former back rower, great player who again had horrendous luck with injuries, Ollie Griffiths, he's now returned to the Dragons as a strength and conditioning coach, just a few months after retiring. And as we know, that part of that reason for retirement was a tumour on his spine. So really, really do wish Ollie all the very best.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in fairness to the Dragons, there's more movement and more positive vibes coming out the camp, isn't there? You look at, we just mentioned the academy system and the rag stuff, that's been going well so far. The addition of another scrum half to add depth to the squad, it is only good news. The two lads that have gone out to play for Tonga have been firing pretty well, is my understanding. I've not seen much of it, only highlights here and there, but they've gone well. To bring Ollie back into the camp, I think, is a smart move. Knows everyone, knows the environment, and hope, and I got no doubt the boys will buy into the things that he wants to bring in, because they know him, they like him, and he's well thought of, and he's been there and walked the walk. So, yeah, it's more positivity, I think, from the Dragons. I don't know whether we've podded since, they sort of done their road show out and about, but they came up to Abertlery and done an open training session up there. They've been up to Caldicot and all around the region. So, I think they're embracing Gwent properly, the Dragons are. And whilst there was a load of upheaval in 2003 when the regions came around, I've spoke about this before, but you go and speak to my 10-year-old son, he's a Dragons fan. He don't know about the stuff that came before.
No.
So we're sort of past all of that now. That sort of old school mentality is the old school mentality now. It's still the Blazer Brigade or people of a certain vintage that remember that era and that are still holding on to stuff. The new school and the new supporters and the people that are buying shirts and going to games and liking things on Instagram and TikTok, etc. They're the new generation. So again, we'll discuss this in a moment, but all the positive vibes coming out of the Dragons. I just hope it's not for nothing.
Right, any more news items, Nick, or are we moving on to the big one?
I'll try and get it up. No, I've got nothing else.
Right, so Nick has kindly got a presentation made up for us all. So I think I'm sure everyone listening here is aware that the WRU have launched their consultation into this new strategy, yet another new strategy, with their plans of changing the funding landscape across the whole game in Wales. So we're going to go through. So we can go through the slides, all the main talking points, add our 2 cents to it all, and see where we think, given the full proposals, what I think safe to say we're probably not thinking the same as the WRU on this.
Ruined my
Okay.
holiday, didn't they? Ruined my holiday. There I was, sat next to the pool out in Spain, and this dropped.
Yeah, okay. Dyfodol Rugby Elite, the future of elite rugby in Wales, and it's well, anyway. Well, let's go through it and see. We will obviously feel free to come in when you can. Obviously, they made a case for change. Won't read through them all. We've discussed this before. We know the men's teams at the lower, very much at the lower end in the URC. There's a need for more competition, which Hattie's alluded to already for the women's teams. There's a feeling, which we might agree with, we might not, about there's too many clubs for our key players. The gap is wide between this Super Rugby Cymru, even though it did show some promise last year, and there's no obviously equivalent for the women at that level. They don't feel it's aligned. There's too much to and froing between the regions, the clubs, so to speak, and the WRU, and they want to address that. As we know from experiences across the world, but particularly in England, you're very reliant on individuals to support the funding of the game. And they think that we could do things better around facilities, how we develop players, coaching, and we're not making the most of the fact that we're really talking about a small country and a small area within a small country, and could we be using that as an advantage then perhaps we're not doing at the moment. So that was the sort of case for change. I'm sure we'll come back to these points as we go on. And I think this is a significant graph or table. Some were of better quality, some were absolute interesting. Let's put that way. Another less favourable term for some of the stuff they put in would be absolute dog shit. They made zero sense.
You haven't shared the screen yet.
Oh, right, sorry. So I put together some slides about the future of elite rugby, Dyfodol Rugby Elite in Hungary. They make a case for change. They talk about professional clubs, which we're fully aware of. All our clubs at I think the very lowest level of funding in the men's game in URC. They feel the talent we've got is too widely spread. Obviously, even though Super Rugby Cymru is in its infancy and showed promise last year, they still think the gap is too large between professional teams, and there's no, as we've already alluded to, Hattie was talking and before about this, the standard of even with the two women's teams, Brython and Gwalia, there's nothing below that of a decent standard either. They feel we're not aligned into a form of playing. There's been too much to and froing around the PR style arrangements over signing and players, when players play and so on, and it's not conducive to a cohesive and collaborative structure. And then there needs to be further investment in our facilities, development centres, support services and coaching. And I think that is a positive in my view, but obviously happy to be challenged on that. And also there's a feeling that there's not enough made of the advantage that we have as a small country, and where professional rugby is played in a small part of our small country, and that could be used better and more efficiently, I guess, to take the game forward.
What's the positive of being a small country with a small playing population then? Have they mentioned that?
Yeah, they talk very much about getting them together more. both from an academy level, and obviously when we come to talk about the national campus, as they call it, it's very much as the views I feel and of Dave Redding. He was heavily involved in setting up the National Football Academy campus, St George's in Burton-on-Trent. So he's got experience of that. And I'm not a big football fan, and whilst I think overall in men and women's football, especially at the age group levels, England are doing much better over the years. It hasn't quite transferred fully to the men's senior team, but the women's team doing very well.
So the theory is, correct me if I'm wrong here, Nick, that because we're a small playing population, we should take the campus style approach that's been good for English football, where they've got a population of however many million people playing the most popular sport in England or the world, where the Premier League is, obviously based as well. Isn't that like a bit of a contradiction?
Yeah, you could argue that. He also wants. We'll come to that later, but he'll talk about what
Yeah,
he
sorry,
sees.
go on.
No problem. But he'll talk very much what he sees about the interactions and advantages, and it's a step further than the football, because when we get that far, the teams will be based in this national campus as well. But obviously, for the football in England, they only come together when they're representing the country,
The national team, yeah.
the national
Absolutely.
team. Just wanted to make the point. I'd say this was, I thought, was an interesting graph, and obviously it is for the last financial year, but just making the point that every team in World Rugby is losing money, quite considerable amounts of money. Wales is actually at the bottom end of that scale, and since then we're led to believe that further tightening the belt has happened at the union level anyway. So that is a concern, and I'm not aware of any other team considering reducing any teams, but we'll see where they might go in the future as well.
But for me, just on that, sorry, Nick, just on
Oh.
that slide, how on earth is rugby union going to survive long term professionally if this is not dealt with by World Rugby?
Yeah, no, that's a very
Because
good point.
everyone's struggling financially, yet everyone seems to be in especially all those which would be tier one nations on there, everyone's pulling in a different direction.
Yeah,
I think
Just baffles me that.
I think as well it's like how rugby is set up, because there, apart from the NFL, there are really very few sports leagues in the world that are actually making any money, because they're just fueled by billionaires. And unfortunately, there's very few billionaires, if any, in rugby,
Yes.
in general. And because so much of rugby is linked to national unions, which are probably slightly less corrupt than a Premier League team, and there's a lot more answering to unions in World Rugby than there are kind of with other sports, it does affect money and how money is made and not having money poured in.
Yeah, I agree with I agree with all that said. But it really worries me because yeah, I'm a Welshman through and through. I want Wales to do well, above all other nations. But ultimately, I want rugby to survive. Where I think we all, you could sit everyone from, a number of people from a number of nations on this pod now, and everyone would say the same thing. I'd hate to see the game go. So I just can't believe that we're all pulling seemingly in slightly different directions to sort of try and save ourselves. Everyone's trying to pull the rope up or the ladder up quickly enough to sort of save their own bacon. Well, we may go and save our own bacon now over the next however many years, but if England goes bang or South Africa go bang, then that's less rugby for us again, isn't it? So I don't know, it just seems a little bit there's not aligned. He likes the word aligned, so I don't think it's very aligned in terms of World Rugby. But there you go. I'll stand down off my soapbox.
I think it's even more stuff. I mean, one thing that really annoys me about this is they talk about absolute value of numbers, and other times they'll use percentages, where it's like, well, what's the turnover? Like
Yeah,
a £5 million loss is quite a lot in terms of an actual amount of money. But if you've made £100 million, 5 million actually is quite a small amount. In the meantime, 43 million, but if you've only made 80 million, now that's a problem. Because you're basically half your thing's gone into debt. But my bigger issue, obviously, we're talking about this is all with tier ones. We're forgetting that, like, if the big tier one nations are losing money, and that, imagine the state of the Pacific Islanders, who are the ones who've get more exposure to rugby than, say, your Brazils or Madagascar, Hong Kong, who's when these up and comings. I mean, they might be a bit better off with the financial situation now. I don't know what the money's like in that place, but because the reaction that all the tier one nations have got is, right, we're losing money. We need more games of international rugby because that makes money. But we're not going to risk bringing in these other developing nations. We're going to go, right, now we're going to invent a league where we're playing the same teams yet again. When the WRU wanted more money, they put on an All Blacks test. Like it's that sort of thing. So it is just being in the top is becoming more and more insular, when maybe actually the idea of the growth is taking a risk and expanding these other teams, or promoting the women's game even more, because Hattie pointed out how little money is actually spent on the women's squad. So actually, if you can get them pulling in the same sort of numbers for games at a fraction of the cost of the men's, they're still going to be making a crap ton more money than you are relatively than the men. So let's start. Ideally, if we got to a point where both the men and the women were pulling in money, that takes the pressure off the men's team, both in terms of performance and just how many games you're getting to tickets, because plenty of people are turning around and saying we actually need less rugby and higher quality rugby, but it's not happening.
Oh, sorry, Nick, go on.
No, just you two just explain to me my favorite graph or page of the document is page 12, I think, where it suddenly shows that we're going to get better because everybody else is going to get worse.
Yeah.
Now, and not the other thing is it's absolutely I can't remember the term they use, but it's beyond doubt. I can't. It's absolute dog shit. By doing these things, we're going to get better, and they're going to get worse. This is South Africa, New Zealand. These are the type of caliber of teams, all their playing stocks.
But even on that graph, we still don't go any better than third.
No. Yeah.
But we're still not hitting any higher than that.
No. Anyway, so obviously what's taken, understandably, the headlines has been the models they put out. I think everybody's familiar with these by now. They've completely gone away with where we were with the 4 professional clubs with equal funding. They're suggesting that a model A, B, C, and D, and we'll come into a little bit more detail as we go through them. And please stop me anytime. And so this is the model A. This is the unequal funding slide, where essentially we'll have an elite club and 2 elite clubs and 2 development clubs. The budgets will be more than they're on now, so at least we know what sort of figures they have in mind. And also there'll be slight increases then in the academy budget and the coaching and backroom staff as well. Then the other concern is that all these budgets are very dependent, as we've already alluded to, private investors, and each of the 4 current teams have got, to varying degrees, funding from people outside the Welsh Rugby Union, and we've seen what can happen when they suddenly decide to pull out again from England, places like Worcester and so on, and the Wasps. So that's Model A, which is, I suppose, at least similar to status quo. Then you have losing a team, what difference that would make. All clubs would have, again, a bigger budget. Similarly, they get then around the other elements of a team and how much the WRU puts in. Then we have two Sky number 3 teams, 3 equally funded teams, of which you could have a 2 or 1, which is what they talk about here. But I suppose you could have a 1 and a 2. But obviously that's losing a club out of the current 4 and all that involves. And finally, they go on to their preferred model, which we'll go into a little bit more detail. So this would be very much 45 senior players, I think they talk about, 20 academy players, a budget of about 8 million, which is round about what Scottish teams, Edinburgh, Glasgow are on. Obviously almost doubling of what we're on now, but still not significantly significant in terms of Leinster, for instance, or certainly some of the higher teams in France. Again, similar but figures going in. What this does very much is reduce the emphasis on private investors. And so basically the Welsh Rugby Union would be funding these games, and that's the commitment they made for 5 years.
I just want to go back to that last model. So one thing
Sure.
is, yes, we're talking about the investors reduction, but also the WRU.
Yeah.
They're basically they're trying to shave off. They could shave off an awful lot more. And it's so one of the things that did get bring up, I'm not sure if it's on a later on slide, but the WRU will have full control of the rugby side of things.
Yeah.
With pretty much any of these models. So we're still asking private investors to come in and pay for the WRU for them to not have any control of any say in things like signings, whatever. The one thing that is you can already see, just because they're not changing the players per club, they're not playing the academy. You can see now how they're narrowing our potential. You know, if this is all about maximizing talent, particularly at the younger levels, but we're basically cutting off with this model. We're cutting off 40 academy players. You know, and that to me just seems wrong. The other thing I don't like about these models is although the next slide talks about women's game in isolation, they don't talk about how, well, if we have model A, then this is what we can do with women's game. And it really bothers me that they're talking about this one Wales and how everything sinks in. But they talk about the men's pro game in isolation, they talk about the women's game. And then they're thinking, well, hang on, you're doing this to the men's, and then you look at the women's and you go, well, hang on, why can't they do more? And there's no, you know, it doesn't say why, if they take out £30 million investment into the men's game, is it going into the women's game? Is it going into the community game? Is it going for more high roof walks? I don't know. They're going to have a submersible tour up the Taff. They don't say what they're doing with that extra money, or is it just they don't think there's going to be extra money there? And I think that lack of transparency for an organisation that even with this new regime have had numerous studies going with the finding of we need to be more transparent and have better communication with all stakeholders, and they still can't do basic things like just saying this is the pot of money, this is the current pie, this is the new pie A, pie B, pie C, pie D. Just one of the general things throughout the whole thing that's stupid.
I think the funding of all of it and the way that they've presented it reminds me of like a GCSE business project because it doesn't make any sense. Like the numbers don't add up.
No.
We don't know where the money's coming from. They're going, oh, it's from outside investors. Well, who are the outside investors? Like this is not a proposal that would be taken seriously by any investor ever because it makes no sense. Like if you're going to propose 4 models, they should all logically have the same pot of money, budgeted out. Why is it different? Why are the numbers of squad players barely changing, if at all? Like what is going on with this? And also the thing that I think sticks out to me is that it almost feels like they've gone, well, this was our initial idea, but you've annoyed us now, so then this is our idea, and then a couple of weeks later they've come up with, oh no, this is our actual plan. This is the one we're sticking in the slide deck, sticking in the thing. This is one we're actually going with, but we'll include our previous ideas just so you all think you've got a choice, but you don't because this is what you're getting. I just hate it. I hate I hate the whole thing.
Yeah, I concur with what sort of Hattie and both Hattie and Harley have said there in terms of the private investor funding. So 17 million quid. I know I'm going to have to invest 17 million quid over 5 years to get what out? I don't know what players I'm going to have to market. I don't know what the product's going to be like at the end of it. I don't know whether I'm going to win any games. Don't know where at the minute I'm going to be playing rugby. I don't know any of these things. But yeah, okay, yeah, here's 17 million quid and hopefully I make, 17.1 back. I don't know whether who in their right mind's going to do that. Everyone's exactly right. The other thing that it makes no mention of is the pathway. So what does the pathway look like for these clubs? So you mentioned, so it's going to have 20 male academy players in Model D, which we all know they want Model D. As Hattie said, this is what we're going to get. So at the moment, in the academy is from what 16 to 20, so it's under 16s through under 20s. Well, 20 we've got 16s age group rugby starting soon. In the men's game, we've got the 18s currently going on. The 20s, will also play. They're out at SRC. But where are those players going to come from now? How are you going to have inter-regional rugby? There's not enough players to put a team together. So the whole thing just seems highly, highly flawed. And that's just us four sat here picking away at little parts of it now, let alone when serious business people get, how is this performance sport? I just, it baffles me, if I'm honest. I like nothing about it whatsoever.
Well,
So,
I've obviously these are mainly slides from their pack, but I
yeah,
have tried to put a spreadsheet together, and if somebody can correct me and I've got it wrong, and I'm not a mathematician, but the numbers just don't add up. There's huge gaps, and if somebody can explain it to me, great. Please make a comment. But as far as I can see, and we'll get to that in a minute, there's big gaps. The only one that isn't a gap, surprisingly, is Model D.
yeah,
And the thing is, I wouldn't mind if they said, oh, the reason why there's gaps is X, Y, Z.
Yeah, exactly, Hattie.
But they haven't.
No, no. Anyway, so that's the situation with the women's game. I don't know if there's anything you want to add from what we discussed before, Hattie, on the women's game.
Yeah, it kind of just sounds like what they told us a couple of months ago, that the teams were going to go to a region and they got to like plan on it. That's gone out the window. That's not happening anymore. Essentially, it's just going to be a professional Gwalia and a professional Breathon. Which is I'm fine with. I'm happy with that. But it does feel like an afterthought. It does feel like the WRU put this all together, and then Belinda stepped into the office and went, "What about me?" Because it doesn't really fit. There's a part of it where it says that they want to include players from overseas, which has really upset some people online. It does make sense bringing in marquee players. You could easily bring in somebody like Neve Jones, who is in a relationship with a Welsh women's player. You could easily have them move down and play for
Yeah,
Breathon, and so those types of things are very easy to achieve. And it's not like women's players are accustomed to having large paychecks, so
no,
it's not going to be difficult. A PWR player makes a couple of thousand a year, so it's not surprising. The thing I would like to know, which it doesn't say anywhere, is are the central contracts staying if this happens, or are the players just contracted by the teams? Are they additional contracts? So are they going to receive a contract with Wales and then an additional top up at the teams? None of that is explained. And it links straight back to last year where Abby Tierney admitted that she didn't realise that the players in the PWR were not making a living wage. So to me, it's just misunderstanding of what the women's game is and where the situation is. So yeah,
and what competition are you going to play in? So you're going to fund
I'm a
two professional teams to continue in the Celtic Challenge, which plays how many games a year?
not many. So it is going up. And the Celtic Challenge, so Ireland have announced that they will be professionalising the provinces. And I think they've said before as well that they want to increase their teams in the Celtic Challenge, so they will have all 4 provinces taking part. And also the pathway in Scotland as well is professionalising quite heavily, and they're really pouring a lot of money into Glasgow and Edinburgh as pathways. So I think the Celtic Challenge is one of those competitions where it's a new competition, it's semi-professional or amateur players playing against each other. The quality is not great. If you had Ireland going fully professional, you had Scotland going professional at a snail's pace, and you had 2 professional Wales teams as well, I think the quality would improve, and a lot of people have compared it to the URC, and I can see it going that way myself.
But initially this season, you're looking at so you have the 4-6. It's still only 8 teams in that league. It's not what I'm trying to say is it's not enough rugby.
It's not. No, it's not. And unfortunately, whereas the Irish players have the AIL and the Scottish players have their domestic competition, Wales, there's nothing underneath for them to play.
Play for like Nelson Bells or
Most of them don't actually. Most of them are playing Bucks rugby, which the season runs at exactly the same time as the Celtic Challenge. So they maybe get 4 games before, and then they're straight into the finals of Bucks.
And
I
the
think the
Women's Welsh
idea
Premiership
is
has more cancelled games than played games at times. It's a
And they're losing a
mess.
team as well, so it's going to be even worse.
I mean, with the number of games, I mean, was it 18 league? You're looking at 16 games. They did place playoffs, and I can't remember if they did semi-final, final type playoffs this season, but they definitely had playoffs.
I think the plan is to do more playoffs next year. To have some games.
So I mean, even then, that's putting you in the same sort of
yeah.
number of games as Super Rugby.
Yeah.
Actually, that I think they only play 15, 16 regular season games, which isn't the end of the world. Particularly if we're trying to see, and with a lot of these players currently, if they've got other jobs, playing much more than that's gonna cause issues in itself. I said my bigger issue is the fact that WRU's first reaction after the World, because obviously Celtic Challenge was originally a World Rugby funded thing. The money ran out, and they instantly went, regions have it, and they forgot that they pay most of the regions, through player release and academy development. So, and then they all panicked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've covered most things on there. But as I say, okay. And obviously the idea with the 2 clubs is for professional teams, getting away from the PRA. So essentially certainly for the men's game, they'll all be centrally contracted, as they are, I think, in Ireland at the moment. Harley, Dan, Hattie?
No, they're not centrally contracted. So they've got certain player contracts now, which I think they've changed the split on it. It's actually weirdly, Ireland is sort of regressing to a previous Welsh funding model where you had like the national dual contract things.
Okay.
So the IRFU directly fund the team managers and sort of like CEOs and head coaches, and then there's sort of that top level. Then it comes from the direct budgets, and then the individual provinces have it. If there are any Irish rugby people who want to correct me on that one, I believe that's how it. So from listening to a Provincial State of Mind when they were explaining this a while back. So I mean, and I think with the PRA 25, that was going to be the plan, was that general managers, head coaches, and head coach / director of rugby and CEOs were all going to be picked by the WRU, or at least heavily vetted.
Yeah. Obviously, similarly with the women's games, very much an emphasis on Welsh qualified players. The great hope is if you can increase the budget, you get younger players who are playing in England. I guess people like David Jenkins, the type player, Archie Griffin, trying to get those sort of players back into the Welsh system playing in Wales. And also those, like last year when we looked at the 20s, there were so many of the 20s players who were playing club rugby or academy rugby in England. So obviously they feel this might be a way to address that. And then when they do go for non-Wales qualified players, they really are, real stars. And the maximum, I think I've read somewhere of 2 per club of, the 2. So in effect 4. You've already talked about the funding, but we will come back to, I think, on the next slide. And this is what we were saying. This is the gaps, which I've, and I hope I've got the maths right, that I've identified that within the funding models, the only one that actually shows that there actually is enough money for is the model, the last model, Model D. And of course, there's a gap then also in where some of this money the Welsh Rugby Union must be able to afford, because they put it for some of the other models. Where's that going to? Is it going into the women's game? Maybe, fair enough. Is it going for the new national campus? I very, very much think so. And let's at least be transparent and say this money is going to, a huge chunk, which we could run up another professional team of on a high budget, is not going to be available because we're setting up a national campus. And I think they need to be absolutely honest about this. At least we can make an informed decision when we're responding as part of the consultation. So I posed a few questions there around those funding issues, those differences, and particularly how much is this national campus going to cost? There's an example from the English FA, 105 million in 2012 for St George National Centre. How much extra will the women's professional clubs get? How much extra, because they said there needs to be a closing of the gap in both the women's and the men's competition. So enhancing Super Rugby Cymru, I think just over £1 million at the moment goes into Super Rugby Cymru from the WRU. And then some other things I do think are quite positive about a better geographical spread and enhancement of those development centres and player pathways throughout Wales. I think the idea is both for women's and men's that nobody's more than 60 minutes away by car from one of those centres. And just to be home in then on the National Academy, this has had the National Campus, I should say, which will include the National Academy. It's not the model, which I know we've talked about before on pods, which when we had a National Academy for youngsters, where it was very much the coaches going out, sort of hub and spoke. This is about bringing it all together. Absolute world-class facilities. Both 4 teams would be based in this National Academy, and let's just say it's based on an enhanced facility in the Vale. That's the sort of message that we might interpret from what was being said. Great having shared essence, strength and conditioning facilities. It is very different even to the best facilities in World Rugby, which you might argue is in France at the moment, because, as I say, this isn't just about age group rugby. This is about having the 2 teams who play, well, currently in the URC, and maybe that's another plan as well. They have a wider plan about where those teams play in the future. So, as I say, it's got Dave Redding's fingerprints all over this. And in fairness to him, this won't be new to the board. He went through, I would imagine, a rigorous interview process, and he's presented this to them. It's maybe a bit of meat added to the bones. So this is just my view. I can't see this not happening and him staying in his role, because he's sold himself on this model. So how would you feel if we said, this is what I think should happen? Yes, we agree with you, Dave. Here's the job. Here's X amount a year, put it in place, and then to turn around 2 or 3 months later and say, no, it's not happening. And this is very, very expensive. I'll get off my soapbox now.
I am just going to say that I have multiple issues with this. So first of all, if you've got both of the URC teams based in one place, how have you got individual team identities? Second of all, on this map, it says team 1, offices changing in team rooms, and then team 2 the same, right? But didn't they say that this was supposed to be for all of the teams? So where's the space for the 2 women's teams?
Yeah.
Where's the space for the women's team as well? Are they going to have their own training centre? I can't imagine they're building two of these. Why can they not just upgrade the facilities we already have? Why do we need an entirely new centre? Why do we have to build a brand new one, which even in their design doesn't match up to what they've said?
That as well as why do the two teams both? I mean, even before the men and the women split, why do they need to be on the exact same site? I mean, are you saying that you couldn't achieve things like synergizing training language by just going down, even if you said you kept the Vale and Darcy and you had it over two, like say we're going to go with the WRU and it's two team, why does it have to be one whole center instead of having two centers? And then sometimes the coach will have to, unfortunately, go along the M4, which I appreciate is a horrid road. But is it really going to be that detrimental? I mean, we talked about the previous National Academy, which worked, that hub and spoke of having the coaches going around. I appreciate they want the same language. I know they want strength and condition. They want to have more control over players. But they've already got things for that in place. And have they costed potentially improving? I mean, admittedly, Cardiff is going to cost because they basically got to build all their stuff at the moment with the crap show that happened with the Penn Twin Leisure Centre debacle. But Scarlet's has invested quite a lot of money in the barn and all their facilities. Darcy is pretty good from everything I've heard from that way. I said I know. It's
Ystwyth
that's one.
Okay.
Name was the Dragons.
Yeah, home of Gwalior Lightning.
I've heard criticisms of it, but I mean, is it really that unfit for purpose that that couldn't be boosted?
It could be, but that's not performance sport. They got one field, one rugby field there. That's all weather. It's effectively shared then with the community. Local rugby clubs use it as well. There's a football field on it. It's used by local football clubs. And then it's just the upstairs that's been used by the Dragons, but it's also used by other rugby clubs as well, meeting rooms. It's not performance sport. 100% it's not. There's only a small gym facility in there. And that's why the Dragons, you'll see, will go down to USW for Block 1 and Block 2 of pre-season. Because of the facilities they've got.
Is it that bad a thing to share facilities with universities? And develop on their campuses? Because Leinster do it. I mean, I know Swansea Uni and Ospreys are looking. That's part of the big thing with the St Helens redevelopment is that Swansea Uni are quite keen to have facilities there. Are these things that have been looked at? Because they're sort of giving us our grand plan as we've already established. They seem to put all the effort into Plan D, and then everything else is thrown in as a sort of pseudo choice. Yeah, well, and at the end of consultation, they're still going to go with D. Because everyone's going to turn around and say, well, plan A, B, and C aren't costed properly. So I said, well, there you go. It's got to be D. I don't get why. I get the central system works. And I get why they want it as it. And we've all said the National Academy seems to work quite well. But I don't see why this is necessarily improvement on again going out or just having camps to come in, paying for having maybe some residential facilities for those who have to travel up from North Wales or whatever. Yeah,
I think it's important to look at first and foremost, I'll name my colours to the mast here and I want to stay with 4. So I've seen a lot of stuff on X primarily whereby 4's never worked, 4's been a load of rubbish. Well, that's just nonsense because we've won, since regional rugby's come into play, we've won 4 Grand Slams, 5 or 6 Six Nations titles. We've been to 2 World Cup semi-finals. We've been to number 1 in the world. Cardiff have won the European Challenge Cup twice. And I think the Ospreys have won the league title in whatever form it's been in 3 times. And the Scarlets have won it twice or 3 times as well. And I had an interaction with someone on X a little while ago. I think the Ospreys are the second most successful club in this Celtic / Magnus / Pro 14 history with 3 or 4 league titles. We, on top of that as well, let's not forget, mind the bulk of the 2013 British Lions squad would have 10 or 11 Wales starters in that final test match. We've created two Lions captains in that period of time. Welsh Rugby has been successful under regionalisation. So unless you've been watching something else or got some other stat to look at, we've been a success, and I think we've been a success anyway. So why are we? It's it's not completely broken at the moment, is it? It does, the framework is still there. We just need to reinvest in the things that have been underinvested, especially in the men's game. I'm talking about you now, for the last, especially since COVID and since they started, they ripped up the regional academy and so on and so forth. The pathway is completely different now. We had a discussion in the WhatsApp group. The pathway doesn't start until EPP, which is do a shield at sort of 15, 16 years of age. I think that's too old. We're losing, trust me now, rugby's losing a number of athletes to football in Wales at the moment, especially in the men's game, due to the fact that Welsh football's, seen a period of success since 2016. As we started to tail off over that period of time in rugby, now football's seen a period of success. So we're fighting that battle all the time. There's no rugby in primary school. My boy's in primary school at the moment. His school's not had a rugby team or done any level of rugby really, unless the Dragons have gone in all his primary school career, and he's about to go into year 6. So we're missing out on capturing people, aren't we? All the work in the pathway in reality is being done at the rugby clubs, with the volunteer coaches and so on and so forth, until these kids get to 16 years of age. For me, that's not good enough. You've already got a lot of bad habits. Now, do you understand what performance sport is, or professionalism? Unless you're lucky enough to come from a sporting background, maybe, or you've got a real keen interest in it at the age of 16. So I think that there are some things that can be we're talking about hundreds and, £100 million here. I think that could be reinvested into better facilities locally at each region. Why is someone like a Dave Redding got to go into the national setup? Why are we not pushing Dave Reddings into the 4 regional setups to do this on a more regionalised basis? There's no doubt about it. Like a Dave Brailsford that's gone into Man United and done all the things that he's done with the cycling team and the Tour de France and so on and so forth. That's real performance sport. I've mentioned it before. You go and look at like these NFL documentaries on. You go and look at the facility that the Dallas Cowboys got, the Star or whatever it's called over there. That's real performance sport. And then the Dragons are training out of Monach. Now I know the budgets are different, massively different, but come on, we're way off. We're way off it in terms of actual performance sport. I think, especially at our club rugby level. And I think Gatland, when he was in his pomp, always used to say, didn't he? They're coming into the national setup, which is where performance sport takes over, and he was able to have more control over that, especially during his first period in charge. But I think once we lose it and we go to 2, we never get it back. And what's after that? We drop to 1. We just have a Welsh team competing in all of these things. So there's more to be done. The other elephant in the room for me is they mention all of this funding for the men's game. Well, what are you spending in the women's game? Let's be honest about it. Because I don't think people can moan on social media and so on and so forth if they go, look, yeah, we're going to remove money from the men's game and we're going to give it to the women's game. We're going to try and even that playing field. I think that's like fair cop. Okay, let's see how they get on with it, because we haven't done very well, particularly over the last five years. So I don't know. I'm 4 teams. I think there can be improvements made at regional level. Why do we want to drop the professional rugby opportunities for, we go from 4 fullbacks to 2 fullbacks playing every week. Same at fly half, same at scrum half. We got a tight head problem, I would say, in Wales at the moment. So instead of having 4 tight heads or 8 tight heads with those on the bench, coming on and gaining experience every week could be a real rough diamond in there that just needs a bit of polishing. We're going to cast them aside and just go to it. It's real short-sighted, in my opinion, that may result in some short-term gain, where we sort of, effectively we've got half a national team, if you like, playing both sides of that east and west border. But in the long term, I think it's really going to affect us because we're just not going to have the numbers coming through. If we don't think we've got the numbers of talented people coming through now, we're going to have even less talented people coming through when we go down to two, because it's gonna alienate so many people. But there you go. That's just my 2 penny worth on it.
Just like I said, just want to go with one final thing with the funding, and talking about the regions failing now. I mean, like what we're going to remember is last season we had 3 of the 4 teams had a genuine shot at the playoffs. Like they were genuine
Thanks for
shots.
that.
All right, they were taking. Sorry, no, you bollocks after week 2. And we were doing that on bugger all budget. All right, admittedly,
Yeah.
it might have gone differently if Scarlets had an injury crisis, or Jockey decided to take the Benetton away game a bit more seriously and sack off this Challenge Cup. And that that would have been different. I mean, remember the toughest game Leinster had to the title was the quarterfinal against Scarlets.
What a game.
So it was a brilliant game. I don't want to give praise to the Scarlets whenever, but Lee's not here, so we know he's not going to get too big about it. But that was on a minuscule budget, and the problem with those budgets is the fine margins. It doesn't take too much to have the Dragons injury crisis, or the way that basically every single fit block, all 26 million of them in the Swansea area, got injured at the same time. That's where the extra money needs to be. And I'll be honest, I'd rather, I don't think we need to increase the budgets as much as people are saying. Whereas I think what we'd be better off doing is putting extra money into the pathways, into things. So effectively, because then you've got the cheap labour of the younger kids, instead of basically one of the issues Scarlets have had is they couldn't afford to keep all their academy talent, so they're letting them go. They were developing in the English Championship, and they're trying to get them back in. But instead of them being on, I don't know, was it 20 grand or something, whatever it is for a senior academy contract, they're having to pay them the same as as someone who's been there a while, because they're now an experienced professional player.
Yeah, and you mentioned the money, so I think the money's a valid point, because if everyone's saying that these current players are not particularly talented, and we just haven't got a talent in Wales, so we're just going to get rid of 2 teams so we can pay these untalented players more money. It's that sort of head scratching stuff. If you underinvest in the foundations of a house, it's going to have subsidence, isn't it? It's as simple as that. And that's what's happened in Welsh Rugby. We've underinvested in the pathway, in the coaching, in the coach development, in the coaches, even at the academy. Look what happened at the Dragons this season. Philo comes in to be the defence coach to stop Di Flanagan doing, every job, including emptying the bins and cleaning the stands out. And then they sacked Di Flanagan, which we can sit here and argue the toss over that, because the Dragons were competitive in all of those fixtures, even though they lost. And then Philo comes in and is having to do, the defence job and the head coaching job and whatever else they were having to do. So, that's where the investment needs to be made. I think a lot of these players can become 5 or 10% better if they're coached, better, if their sports nutrition's better, if their physiotherapy and the medical side of things are better, if the S&C is better, if all of these things and all of these people are the best in the business, the best that we can get, then naturally they're going to improve the players as well, because that's their job, to improve those players' performance on the rugby field. But we're not doing that.
No, it does feel like we're robbing Peter to pay Paul constantly, and it's not paying off because we're just neglecting any form of development. I also feel like as well, we're not developing, because we're not developing our players, we're not developing coaches, we're not developing S&C staff. Like there's no development at any level. If you like, the amount of referees that are coming through the Welsh pathway seems absolutely minuscule. There is 1 Welsh referee at the Women's World Cup, which is obscene to me. So no part of the pathway is being invested in any form of rugby. And now we want to make everything even smaller to build a giant training academy.
Yeah,
It doesn't make any sense to me.
But this is where I think the money is going.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Nick. I agree with what you're saying. I think that's where they are going to want to put the money. I think you're right, as in they're going to back Dave Redding. But again, I've harped on about for ages, the transparency around it is absolutely shocking. How can people make informed? I notice that they've put out the survey, the public survey, I think this evening now. That started to drop on my phone since we've been recording. We can go and have your say. But how can proper rugby people make an informed decision on the information that we've been provided?
Yeah.
So how can Hattie make a decision on what her answer on said survey when she doesn't know how much the women's game's getting?
No.
You don't know what the pathway is going to look like for the women. You don't know really what league that the teams are going to be playing in. So how can you make a decision on that? And it's the same on the men's side of the house. It's, what do the two teams look like? Is it East and West? Do they create two new teams? Or is it Cardiff and Llanelli? Because if it's Cardiff and Llanelli, you're going to lose a lot of people. If it's East and West, where does that border, does it go from north to south? So does the East involve, like, I don't know, is it Wrexham as close to the border and stuff like that? Is it,
Yeah.
how do they start building an identity for those teams? What does that look like? Who's in charge? Because that's really important now in the modern day. If you invest in someone who's a real pie hot marketer and can start getting buy-in and get TikToks out and Instagrams and all of these things targeting kids like my boy's age, then you may have more chance for success on that side of things, because it's all well and good having two teams made up of primarily all internationals playing in Wales. But if you've got no one going to watch it because you've alienated everyone, it's not going to last very long, is it?
No. Okay,
So,
and then
Can we just go back that slide? Sorry, because there's something that I think I don't know if Hattie's noticed this, but we just look at the difference between the men's and the women's national academies here. So we're talking about this being an opportunity to put money in, and it's right. We're going to have 70 to 80 players in the men's national academy. What, with two teams where they're only having 20 people each?
Yeah.
All right. So maybe that's just the seniors. So maybe that's just the 18 to 23. That gives you 30. Get about 35. You've got your 30 players leeway. Right, fine. But then you've only got 20 to 25 academy players between it for the two women's team. But in the women's team side, they said that they wanted the same sort of numbers as the men.
This whole thing annoys me so much, and I have sat here thinking about this multiple times. I have many gripes with it. One, you have the huge disparity between the amount of players, and I would like to point out there are more girls under 18 playing rugby in Wales than there are in England. We have the numbers. If you develop them well, we'll see what can happen. My issue is that there is no detail here whatsoever aligned to women's national coaching model, a contracting model. Well, what does that mean? Are you going to change it? Is it going to stay the same? Why is there no detail here? Also, it annoys me that the age range, the boys start 16 to 18 at part-time, but the women are full-time from 18 to 23. Well, the academies in England for women's rugby are starting much younger. We're getting girls going across to Hartpury at 16. So do we lose them when they turn 16 and we don't get them back? We almost lost Gwennon Hopkins to England because she'd been there, she'd qualified. So this is a huge issue that we could see coming up. We lost Lucy Packer, we've lost Meg Jones. We have the players that England have already stolen or have tried to steal from us. If we've got players going over at 16 and they're staying in a pathway in England, why would they come back?
I think that's a really good point. And I also think that the union are potentially missing a trick as well, in that because our pathway is so short at the moment, it starts so late, that I think the pathways can be amalgamated up to a certain age.
As they are in France.
As they are in France. Oh, you know much more about that than me, but especially working on certain skill sets. So catch, pass, running, S&C, kicking, lines of running, all of the things that, and at an earlier age as well, you know, the contact stuff until you get to a certain point, and I'm assuming the scientists would be able to give us a better cut-off point in terms of that. But there are loads of things all the way through into senior academy, really, where the boys and the girls could train together.
Yeah, 100%. It's already happening in France. It's one of the reasons why France under 18s and France under 20s women are so good, because they're training with the boys, they're having the same facilities, the same coaching. It's why they're excellent.
There are plenty of skills that, you know, I understand then that, you know, you're going to have much bigger men than women, so the contact stuff and the scrum stuff, etc., would need to change. But there's no reason why you can't practice kick-off receipts, or you can't practice catch pass and shape and structure and all of these other skills that go with it together. And therefore you're pooling resources. So you're actually saving money,
Mm.
or you're bringing in extra coaches, and then the girls are having the best coaching as well as everybody else. So I can't see, because that used to happen. I'm sure I remember growing up playing against girls at least until maybe 13.
Yeah.
And I know there was the issue around, like, I think it was, you know, changing facilities and so on and so forth. But certainly was when I'm nearly 40 now, so obviously it's a long time ago. But I'd be interested to see how that would improve the game on both sides of the house again, if that was a possibility now. Because I think my understanding is, and I coach a kids team now, any girls that are playing in mixed, obviously it's mixed rugby, but at under 12s they need to go elsewhere.
Mm.
So if how many girls are you losing to other sports and other things then, because they got to go elsewhere at 12, because we can't accommodate them. Because I know, like, a coach a kids team at Blackwood RFC. Well, all the girls that are playing rugby, they're not playing for Blackwood RFC girls under 12s, because they haven't got a girls under 12s.
Girls.
So
No.
where do they go? I don't know. There's no reason why they couldn't stay a bit longer,
Yeah.
especially in terms of training and so on and so forth. So I don't know, maybe we're missing something. The whole thing is, I think, as we've all sort of alluded to, is just devoid of any detail, isn't it? You know,
Yeah.
how can you go and make any informed decision on the stuff that they that they publicise, and you just can't.
And if there's going to
Well,
be any group of people that are going to rip something apart, sort of sentence by sentence, it's going to be Welsh Rugby followers.
definitely, definitely. Okay, so they've tried to then score things within these areas: high performance, commercial, feasibility. Those are the areas, and then they've traffic lighted it thereafter. Highly contentious for me. You know that the feasibility of a two model is moderate. Feasibility for the three clubs is poor. Well, once you start talking, surely they should all be, other than the first one, they should all be red. Because once you start talking about losing a team, it is highly contentious and highly difficult. So let's say at best it's subjective the way they've applied that. I think, you know, quite rightly you could criticise that.
I don't know what other slides you got on there,
I
Nick,
think this is more or less the last one, I would think.
but for those people that are listening, obviously I go and read, because there's some things that they've published on these slides that are just factually untrue.
Yeah.
The one was about player numbers in the men's game. I think it was the men's game. They published the data from during COVID,
Yeah.
saying that we've got, the most professional playing opportunities, but the least amount of the least amount of player numbers. And I'm like, well, during COVID, we probably would have, because no one was playing rugby during COVID. You couldn't touch each other.
I think that's the same one, Dad, when they claimed there were three professional teams in South Africa.
3 professional teams in South Africa. They mentioned there was only 5 professional teams in New Zealand, only the Super Rugby teams, not mentioning the NPC teams,
No.
which is
They
currently
said only
playing now.
14 in France, despite the fact the top 3 leagues of France is professional. It's fully
So-
professional. I think up to National 2 or Federal do is also, some of the teams are fully professional there. It's
Yeah, and at the
they
top,
ignored Curry Cup, they ignored that. It basically, it wouldn't take you too long to pull it apart. It
No,
was just
I'm completely convinced that it's AI, 100%, and it's just pulled random data, because anybody with a little bit of ball knowledge knows that it's wrong.
It's just, and I'll give him a little bit of credit. I think it says at the top like elite playing opportunities, but then down the right hand side of the slide it says professional opportunities. So
Yeah.
they're even getting that mixed up.
Yeah.
It just reeked to me that they're really trying to sort of gaslight everybody's opinion into going, oh, it must be, look, it must be right. It's on a WRU slide, but just the facts in there are wrong. Just totally wrong. You know, you go and watch the NPC play now. There's some quality rugby players playing in that NPC competition. You know, the people that are on the All Black side and that have been in and around Super Rugby will go back and play NPC. You know, there'd be All Blacks playing NPC rugby out. I would have thought at the moment. So to say that the professional opportunities are greater in Wales and some of these countries, I just thought was completely wrong. So again, there's a transparency and a trust issue, isn't there, between you know, our governing body and the rugby public in Wales. You know, when it's our national sport, and it is really important to everybody. You know, there are a lot of rugby clubs in Wales. You know, with a lot of history. It's a family thing. It's a historical thing. And they're failing us at the moment. And if they don't get it right, they've got one opportunity to get it right now, haven't they? One opportunity, and I fear the worst.
Well, I fear the worst just from my own work experience, and I've been talking to a colleague from the Osprey Grant who was employed in Port Talbot, just taking a retirement now because of what's going on there. So we've both been involved in a few consultations, and my theory is once these sort of things go to consultation, the right things are said about we're listening, we want to hear your views and so on. But more often than not, tweaks are made to the proposal as opposed to major changes. So my view, for what it's worth, is I will be very shocked if we end up with more than 2 teams. And I will be very shocked if we don't have a national campus. But that's just my view.
Just want to talk about the thing that you pointed out, that feasibility for 2 teams should be read. But I mean, the big elephant in the room people don't want to accept is we've got 3 independent businesses and a WRU owned team. And the big feasibility issue is the legal stuff around trying to tell Scarlets, Dragons, and Ospreys, one of you's going to go, or 2 of you are going to go. Like the easiest, the 3 teams actually is easier because they could just turn around and wait for Cardiff, but they've already said they're not going to. Right, but in terms of legality and business sense, Cardiff is easy enough to get rid of because they can just it's a subsidiary company of the W. They can just wind it down. Like that's that done. The issue with 3 teams then is neither the English or the URC want us to have 3 teams. They want either 4 or 2.
Or 2.
Because even numbers are nice. But otherwise, you're looking, and like, if you're going for 3, are you going to have 3 separate entities, or are you dropping one? And the same for 2. Are you going to have 2 separate entities, or are you going to for 4? And either way, you are going to cause a lot of issues in the legal thing, which will end up making the whole point moot. Because I think it's going to be tied up in so much money for the legal side of things that there'll be nothing left for the actual rugby.
You know, to sort of bolt onto that point, you know, we talk about the Dragons. I see all over social media, the Dragons should be the ones to go, results, blah 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 blah. And yeah, you know, I accept that the Dragons' results have been poor. However, now off the field, the Dragons are doing very well off the field. You know, they own Rodney Parade. The ownership group is proactive. You know, we signed the PRA for whatever that's worth or may not be worth now. But if they think that the likes of David Buttress, who's a successful businessman, an entrepreneur, and you know, is now chief executive at an energy company, is it OVO Energy? He's at Mr. Buttress, I think. So if we think that he's just going to go away now, go, yeah, I poured all this money into the Dragons. Yeah, wind it down, no problem. Don't worry, forget about it. So who's giving, if the union want to close something down, who's paying him his money back?
Well,
I don't know.
we've talked between ourselves, haven't we? The other one, which of course, which might be used for this, is that the naming rights of the stadium is up for renewal.
Well, I think, yeah, and I'd forgotten about that. Now, um, I think it's January, Nick, isn't it?
I believe so. It was 10 years coming up to January when Principality had it for peanuts.
And it was 10 million over a
Something like that, wasn't it?
million
Wasn't it,
quid,
Dan?
million quid a
Yeah,
year
yeah,
over 10 years, 10 million. Now, as everyone listening to this probably knows, Twickenham is now the Allianz, and that's 10 million a year, 100 million. Now, again, I put this out on Twitter when all of this started, and someone come back at me going, "Well, you expect a sponsor to, pay as much as they do in London?" My rebuttal on that was, well, yeah, absolutely, because we have all Twickenham does is host rugby fixtures.
yeah,
We host the same rugby calendar at the Principality Stadium in the best rugby city in the world. I think we can all agree on that. And you go and speak to
yeah,
anyone around the world, they all love coming to Cardiff because of um, the set. And on top of that, we've hosted what we hosted this year alone: Oasis, it's had Taylor Swift, it's had the
mm,
Stereophonics, it's had Catfish and the Bottlemen. It hosts like all the Monster Truck and the indoor speedway stuff. It's hosted the Champions League football in the last decade. It's hosted previously FA Cup finals and charity shields and League Cup finals when Wembley was being rebuilt.
yeah,
It's hosted the WWF or the WWE, whatever it is now, the wrestling stuff, all of that sort of stuff. It is a global it's a global event stadium. So if
yeah.
that's not worth 100 million in terms of sponsorship money, I think that the WRU have got a really raw deal
Mm.
out of that, and someone should be held accountable for it. Now, you imagine that level of cash being pumped back into rugby solves a lot of problems. Because I'm sure I read somewhere, and I think it might have been the guys at Wales Online was it that said that, and Steph Thomas saying that the shortfall was something like 35 million over 5 years.
Mm.
I stand to be corrected on that if I'm wrong, but I'm sure I read or listened to him say somewhere that was the shortfall. Well, in 5 years, with that stadium deal, we could potentially earn 50 million.
And
So
again, as we said before, it's about transparency, isn't it, Dan?
transparency, yeah.
I understand there might be negotiations this moment, and it's not signed, sealed, and delivered, but it's going to have a significant impact in these conversations. And I'd be very, very annoyed if we suddenly find that that sort of deal has been done and it's announced in November when they've already said we're losing one, two teams.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be even more annoyed as well, Nick, if we come out of it with another, shoddy 10 million quid deal for the type of facility that it is, and
Mm.
whoever's negotiated that deal should be, well, I don't know, sort of
Mm.
sent packing and because it's just not good enough.
Sent us
Take
an
to
essay,
swim the
something
taff
like
naked with a paper cup.
Yeah,
that.
yeah, something along. I could get on board with that. Something along those lines. But you know what I mean? There's
Yeah,
sure
no,
and
definitely.
surely knowing the financial state of the rugby since COVID, and I understand it's
Mm.
been difficult and blah blah blah, but someone must have gone, hang on, January 2026 stadium deals up. Let's go and let's go and see what Allianz want to give us, or let's go and see
Yeah.
what Amex want to do with us, or MasterCard, or I don't know, call it what we want, the Amazon,
Who cares? Who
who
cares?
cares?
Literally don't care. As long
Yeah,
as we get the money.
exactly. So that's another elephant in the room at the moment as well, I think. Because I don't know why, but I've got this horrible thing. Because surely something like that, September now, surely something like this has been being negotiated for a while.
Yeah.
Nothing surprises me with the WRU though.
Mm.
Absolutely nothing. So if it turns out that they've all forgotten, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, there'll be an email drop into someone's inbox on the 1st of January going, oh,
Your
you know,
subscription's
your
ending.
subscription's ending. Yeah, I don't
The
know,
trial
unless there's
period is
something.
over. You're now paying full price.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they're afraid to announce that. I don't know. There was a extension clause that the Principality have decided to, trigger. I don't know. But no one. That's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
No one
It's about
knows.
transparency, isn't it?
And the big thing for me on this, and people need, I think everyone needs to remember, is that the union is. It's not the Welsh Rugby Union. The WRU is not Amazon. It's not Apple. It's not a private. It's it's our game. It's the public's
Mm.
game. it's everybody's game, it's everybody's company. So, you know, there should be much more transparency. And I'm not saying that from a point of view of like, you know, I think, you know, the pro game, we've had this discussion before, you know, the pro game needs to be separated from the grassroots, but it is everybody's game. And in order to make an informed decision, you need to be transparent. As much as possible. So, and there's that, you know, there's that word again. We must have said it about 15 or 20 times tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So one final point, though, David Butchers, because I know you listen to this pod. The OVO Stadium Cardiff has a fantastic ring to it. Just leaving that on the table there for you. I know you've spent more than your fair share on Welsh Rugby in the past, but it does have a nice ring.
My energy bills will go up then, surely, you know, just to offset the cost of sponsoring the stadium.
I mean, one thing that Abby did say is that they're looking at decking the place out in solar panels, which is something like, as a more of an eco nut, is something I do approve of. As someone who makes the most of the fact that Optus NG are currently paying me money at the end of each month with my export, I'm quite happy with it.
Yeah, I have to say thank you, OVO. My solar panels and me do appreciate my feed-in tariff.
Other energy supplies are available, but they are usually terrible.
Yeah.
maybe OVO just want to sponsor the pod.
Yeah.
Yeah, take that. Any money we might actually be able to be paid. As far as I'm aware, all the money goes into Lee's drinking fund.
Allegedly.
Alleged. Sound like a true
Oh no,
crime
he definitely has a
podcast
drinking
now.
fund.
A true crime podcast, yeah.
All right. So thank you for joining me. Thank you all for listening to this slightly longer pod, but I'm sure given the circumstances, you can appreciate why we've taken a bit of extra time. If you've enjoyed what you're listening to, please share the podcast with your friends, like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you didn't like it, leave a comment, because we always enjoy reading constructive criticism and unconstructive criticism. And more importantly, it gives Lee something to do in his spare time.
He loves it.
So thank you, Nick. Thank you, Dan, for joining me as always. Thank you, Hattie. I hope having someone fresh and positive on became a jaded podcast last season, it becomes more of a permanent fixture. And I hope everyone has enjoyed this. Enjoy your rugby. Good night.